Hello indie game fans, if you love games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Advance Wars and want more, indie developers have your back, so let's begin with Warside, a game that wears its inspiration on the sleeve, since this is pretty much Advance Wars in all but name. Down to the theme, ability to capture buildings which can then produce more units, 12 different playable commanders, land, air and sea troops, a single player campaign, multiplayer support, and even a built-in mission editor, where it looks like this developer loved the series so much and wanted to make their own, and I have to say, they have absolutely nailed the pixel art sprite work in this. You think you have seen everything, but then comes along a title like Dice Gambit, a turn-based tactics title that uses a hexagon grid instead of a square grid and incorporates the rolling of dice into the combat. You play as a family of noble inquisitors who are tasked with slaying chromatic monsters, all set against the backdrop of political strife and intrigue in the city. Dice can be combined to result in new special abilities and attacks, with the ability to re-roll them so that you can somewhat change your fortune, with the almost rogue legacy kind of traits for each character being one of the most interesting aspects, not to mention an interesting art style as well. It still amazes me how year after year and indie game after indie game, Final Fantasy Tactics still remains as the bar for tactical RPGs, with indie titles that have come close but not quite reached the same level of fame, with another game to try being Guild Saga Vanished Worlds. This is set in a typical high fantasy world in which members of the Heroes Guild attempt to stop an enraged deity as well as a mysterious cabal hell-bent on reviving an ancient evil. I'm not completely sold on the sprite work here, with the character proportions looking just a little bit off, but the developers seem to have thoroughly thought out the mechanics and systems in this game, from a profession system to resource gathering and crafting, a companion relationship system, narrative choices to make and branching paths in the story, with the best part being that this releases in April, so we should get to play very soon. Here's a tactical RPG with perhaps more of a strategy element, since you play as the Grandmaster of an arcane chivalric order that is supposed to protect the world. Magic is beginning to reawaken, which leads to its associated monsters and beasts crawling out of the depths, so the Knights of the Order must fight back to keep the world safe. Interestingly, this takes place in both indoors locations like castles, ruins, and dungeons, but also has overworld combat, with the fully destructible environments factoring into your strategy in combat. There are meta management layers, since you have the goal of restoring the Brotherhood, as well as to reinforce your stronghold, which will come under attack, so there's strategy aplenty in this title, with a stunning pixel art look as well. Here's a new game which I have not covered in the past, in which Prelude Dark Pain is a sick-looking tactical RPG that has that graphic novel kind of art style, which was made famous by games like Darkest Dungeon, and is set in an equally grim-dark fantasy world. You play as a blacksmith who eventually rises to become the leader of a revolution, with meta strategy layers on top of the turn-based combat. There's a settlement to build and manage, smaller missions that you can send small parties of heroes out to tackle, raids to conduct, resources to exert control over, and more, with a non-linear open world structure as well, and looks awesome. Here's another new title to the channel in Those Who Rule, one that uses hexagons in the grid, and in contrast with other titles on this list, is set in a low fantasy, morally grey world. You play as fresh recruits who will uncover the truth behind the never-ending conflict that plagues your country, which of course is where I expect the morally grey choices to be made, having an interesting art style as well. There has not been that much movement on Arc Seed since we last took a look, but apparently this will be releasing in Q2 2024, so we might see the release sooner rather than later. This is a mecha tactics title in which you pilot powerful giant mechs to face off against interstellar archangels, which seem to have a cosmic horror slant to them, and if you love giant robots, this is the game for you. I'm not quite sure what happened to the development of The White Raven since it was signed with publisher Critivo, but that has since changed to become self-published, and where the developer has been relatively quiet on public-facing social media like their Twitter account, with the last post in 2022 around the time of their Kickstarter campaign. However, they are updating Kickstarter backers with the last post on February 6, 2024, so development is still ongoing for this tactical RPG, with a shaman as a main character. Interestingly, the same main character can have different personality types depending on the options you choose, so there are more RPG elements here, but it also has a semi-open world structure, so there should be replayability. The pixel art looks good and has you battling in maps that cross over into the underworld, so there are demons and monsters in addition to regular human enemies, so here's hoping we see the release someday. If you love Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics, a title to watch is Lords of Nysera, one that did take to Kickstarter and was successful, in which this high fantasy entry looks pretty classic but has new ideas. For one, there is a separate aerial battlefield that only flying units can access, as well as the ability to use spells to alter the battlefield, such as freezing a river to create an alternative route. There's also Fog of War, which makes stealth a viable option, along with diplomacy, crafting, and even a companion relationship system like in Fire Emblem. So it takes from all the greats and puts their own spin on things. While the character portraits are not my favourite, the pixel art looks awesome, so I'm definitely keeping an eye on this game. This next title I have mentioned in the past, in which I was wondering whether Hexxen hunters might get any possible lawsuits from the Hexxen with 1X first-person shooter people, which is now under the Microsoft banner, but apparently this is based on a tabletop RPG named Hexxen 1733, which is pretty popular in Germany but has not gotten an English language version, although the creators are working on that as well. You play as hunters while fighting back against the forces of hell in order to save the world, in which every hero is unique and has their own special abilities and attacks. The art style has that thick outlines plus cel-shaded look, which is pretty neat and should be a 2024 release as well. Here's a tactics title with an atypical setting in alternate history 1970s Southeast Asia, in which Kriegsfront Tactics sees you becoming the commander of a mecha squad that is sent behind enemy lines. It's a procedurally generated title, so there might be some roguelite influence on this game, in which I absolutely love the look of the mechs, which has a retro feel to them rather than the shiny, futuristic look of Gundams, for example. There are pilots to recruit with special abilities, but I'm not too sure on what the overall structure of the game would be like, so I'll be waiting for more details on this. Perhaps it was fate that I didn't make this video last week, since in the days since then, the developers have just released a new launch trailer with a fancy animated introduction which looks good, in which Dream Tactics is an impressive looking tactical RPG in which our party of 3 heroines are battling to prevent the collapse of the dream world. You do so by fighting pillow enemies, which is certainly unique, and does incorporate deck building systems as well, with over 100 cards and abilities to use. The ultra minimalist sprite work is well done, and while not for everyone, I think that it looks pretty neat and is up my alley. Additionally, there are swarms of enemies to battle in much larger quantities than a regular tactics game, but you do have area of effect abilities to take out a bunch of them at a time, and add to that leveling, XP and RPG mechanics, and it looks like you have a winner, with this also releasing in April. I'm pretty sure Mars Tactics was supposed to release in 2023, but it has since been delayed to 2024, in which this tactical RPG set on the Red Planet is interesting for a number of reasons. For one, there are 2 opposing factions at war of labor versus capital, with each side having their own advantages and disadvantages. A mega corporation has monopolized the mining of a rare element on Mars while exposing its miners to deadly conditions, so it is class warfare all over again. the new gameplay trailer does show off more of the game, as well as the interesting ideas in it, such as destructible environments and buildings, even being able to use a grenade to blow a hole in the ground, which then becomes a pit that you can use for cover. The conflict also spans the entire planet, so you have multiple outposts to manage and territory to capture, including a meta strategy layer of having to employ researchers and engineers to advance your own technology. Characters also have special traits that result from their actions and will carry battle scars from one fight to the next, and looks like one of the most promising upcoming games. A not-so-indie title is Crown Wars The Black Prince, coming to us from French developer Artifact Studios, who is best known for the CRPG title The Dungeons of Nihilbilk Amulet of Chaos, being a medieval tactical RPG in a dark fantasy world.
Consider it done.
This has the classic warring nations and political intrigue backdrop, being a revisit of the 100 Years' War, where the in-universe War of Crowns is ongoing and both knights and bandits rampage throughout the world, where you, as a lord, must cleverly maneuver your troops in order to come out on top. But there's something darker lurking in the shadows in the form of a cult. This was initially planned for release in March, but has since been delayed to May, so hopefully that extra time will give them the space required to polish up the game for release. I was so very excited when this game was announced, since Dark Deity 2 is the sequel to a game from 2021, which is pretty good, being a Fire Emblem style tactical RPG and looks to be bigger and better. Set 25 years after the events of the first game, a new threat has arisen, so it is up to this new crop of heroes to save the day. There are, impressively, 20 heroes with 45 branching classes to choose from, so there's certainly a lot of variety, along with narrative choices being made which will affect how the story and battles unfold. The developers have also created a roguelite-ish mode that is a shortened campaign but with randomized characters, adding to the long-run replayability of this title. We have also gotten some new footage for Demon School since we last talked about this, which was during Gamescom Asia 2023, in which this seems similar to a Persona Tactics title, combining the time management aspect of university life with the turn-based tactical action on the grid as our heroes battle demons and big weirdos. The art style here looks neat, combining 2D hand-drawn art with 3D environmental objects, and since it is set in a world in between those of humans and demons, there's plenty of room for all sorts of monsters of varying disturbing designs. The differentiating factor here is, in the developer's own words, is where motion equals action, where positioning on a grid matters, and where units will interact contextually with enemies and environmental objects along their path, and I'm pretty sure it will release in Q2 2024. Good news everyone! Tactical Breach Wizards has received a new trailer since we last took a look, which is always good since that's signs of progress, and is especially of interest since it comes to us from the developer of Gunpoint and Heat Signature. As suggested by the title, this is a tactics title in which you play as a SWAT team who just so happen to be wizards, being able to use spells and magic in addition to guns and grenades in order to accomplish their mission. It's a self-described puzzle tactics title, so the levels might be more intentionally designed to be solved as a puzzle rather than leaving it to the randomness of enemy AI. You can make dialogue choices in between missions with different ways to upgrade the spells, as well as a larger geopolitical conspiracy to unravel, having the signature mechanic of knocking enemies through windows, which has become an iconic feature of their games, so it's good news that we have an update, although no release date or window has been announced. This next game simply knocked me over with how good it looks, since it's a pixel art game for pixel art fans, in which Arco is mechanically interesting as well. This is a tactical title, but it's real-time with pause, in which you can stop the action to issue commands to your characters, from movement to who to attack and which ability to use, but when you hit play and the action resumes, these actions are executed simultaneously together with the enemy. As such, it's a different set of tactical decisions to make, since you do need to anticipate what the enemy is going to do, being a different kind of tactics game that I'm all for. It also tells the story of 4 main characters, which will end up intertwined with each other and simply looks beautiful. Here's an exciting one, since Reverse Collapse, codenamed Bakery, has been in development for a long time and finally has a release date in March 2024, where you would think that this wouldn't have taken that long considering it's the remake of a game from 2013. But the visuals have been improved, new gameplay mechanics added, and the narrative and story expanded. Set in the Second Cold War, our heroes are caught between warring factions, with the mystery surrounding codename Bakery, which appears to be the silver-haired girl shown in the trailer, being one of the key plot points. Interestingly, it is set in the same universe as the Girls Frontline mobile gacha games, so there is cause for concern, although it looks like this tactics title is a standalone game without microtransactions, so at least we have this title. Another new surprise which has quickly shot up to the top of my wishlist is Menace, a sci-fi tactics RPG in which you lead an elite strike force fighting back against a hostile alien threat. You need to choose which distress call on which planet to attend to first, deploying marines, tanks, mechs and more to quell the threat, having to manage relations with pirate warlords, mega corporations and planetary governments in order to best position yourself for success. This comes to us from the developers of the mercenary company tactics simulator Battle Brothers, so of course it is of note and should release in 2024. For more general purpose strategy games, watch this video for 20 upcoming titles.